hello, it's me, the time child of classical music. I have a magic trick to show you. I'm going to read your mind. Okay, in my right hand, I have a ticket to see Wicked the movie, parts 1 and 2. You get to see part 2 early. And in my left hand, I have a ticket to see Wicked the musical on Broadway. Which one do you, and you chose the left one without even thinking about it. Okay, in case I have any doubters, let me do it again a second time. In my right hand, I have a ticket to see Into the Woods, the movie with James Corden. And in my left hand, I have a ticket to see Into the Woods on Broadway live, and you chose the left hand one again. Obviously, for pretty much any musical, you would prefer to see the live version rather than the movie version. So why are live musicals always better than their movie counterparts? Now, the answer to this question is more than just live musical good, movie bad. And it's not just because there are a bunch of gross Nepo babies in the movie industry who completely fuck up musicals for fun, but it has a lot more to do with what's going on in our brains. Music can have some pretty gnarly effects on our brains. It can reduce the number of seizures that epileptic people have, and it can help people recover from some pretty debilitating mental disorders. There's a reason why music therapy is a field, right? But live music in particular has a bigger effect on our brain than pre-recorded music does. I know this sounds like a boomer argument. Like, you know, your parents say, back in my day, we didn't have spoofy. We drunk drive to the Led Zeppelin concert. But this is actually something that's real and real scientists have studied. Scientists say it's because pre-recorded music is non-dynamic and non-adaptive. That's a pretty vague description, and those words mean nothing because scientists don't know about music and live performance. So let me explain it from the perspective of someone who is a live performer and has performed in front of an audience. Playing music to an audience of live people who are responding to you play is some of the most fun you can have as a musician. Playing in a studio setting to just record your takes over and over and over again until you get it right is some of the most tedious bullshit you could ever do. Because of this, my live performances tend to be a lot better and more energetic than my pre-recorded studio performance. When you're playing live, you feed off of the audience's energy. You hear them respond to your playing, you hear them clap, you hear them talk to each other about how much they love the music. And in a studio, it's depressing. You're by yourself. Sometimes you're in a sound booth just playing the same thing over and over again. It's like when Gandalf started breaking down in tears on the set of The Hobbit because he didn't have any Hobbit friends because everything was CGI. Also, live performance opens up the door to imperfections in music. We'll talk about this later, but in studio recordings, sound engineers do a lot to pretty up the music and make it not sound like it originally did when it was just being played. And obviously this can't happen in a live setting. You're just playing the music and the audience is hearing it as you play it, which means sometimes notes are kind of out of tune. Sometimes the rhythm is not perfectly in time. This may seem like it's something that would detract from live performance, but actually I think a lot of people would prefer the imperfect live sound rather than the too perfect studio sound. That's the overproduction that a lot of people complain about, and it's the reason why a lot of bands still post their live performances on Spotify. I have a question for you. What does a musical theater audience and an ancient Macedonian soldier have in common? According to Jonathan Haidt, more than you think. Jonathan Haidt is a psychologist, and in this book, The Righteous Mind, he talks about what he calls the hive switch. This is the feeling you get when you're in a big group of your common people, your tribe. For example, he uses raves as a reference. It's a feeling you get when you're a part of a larger whole. You're contributing to something that's larger than yourself. And I think that's the feeling that you get when you're seeing a musical live. You are part of a large audience who's all together, you're all reacting to the same thing together. And that feels really good. That gets adrenaline going, that brings your endorphins up. And this feeling, when added to the already insane effects that your brain has listening to live music, is what makes seeing a musical live such a profound experience. So when those executive scumbags go to make a musical into a movie, they know that they're already at a pretty severe psychological disadvantage. And they try to make up for this disadvantage in a few different ways. One, with really gross, overstimulating visuals. You know what I'm talking about. You know, there's the Milk Bar and Rum Tum Tugger with those super bright LED lights. There's the tulip field in Wicked, which is really oversaturated and colorful. You see, the movie producers do this so the visual elements flooding your brain can maybe make up for some of those, you know, endorphins and happy brain chemicals that you're missing out on without live music. But I think this is pretty ineffective. You know, this is the same screen that I saw Matthew McConaughey get sucked into a black hole in. Flowers or guys walking on stilts just aren't gonna impress me as much. Similarly, audio producers also try to make up for their disadvantage in movies. Like we talked about earlier, when you're recording in a studio setting, you can make sure that each note is perfectly in tune with pitch correct, and you can make sure that every beat is perfectly in time with quantize. In other words, you can make the music inhumanly perfect. But let's talk about some of the other things the audio engineers do to pretty up the audio. One huge one is multi-track layering. Now, obviously, when you're in a live pit orchestra, the number of instruments you get is just what you get. Every instrument is playing its part live. However, when you're pre-recording music, this isn't the case. You can have every instrument track over itself multiple times. Multi-track layering is something that audio engineers have their musicians do in order to create a bigger, beefier sound. A great example of this comes from the Rent movie. Let's look at Another Day. Here is the intro to Another Day live on Broadway. And here it is in the movie where they use multi-track layering and re-recorded the guitar several times on top of itself. It's a pretty huge difference. Audio engineers also use compression to make the audio a lot easier to listen to. Now, if you don't know what compression is, it's when you take the full range of dynamics of volume the music can be and level it out, which means the loudest parts of the music are quieter and the quietest parts of the music are louder. The songs are one consistent volume throughout rather than having crescendos and diminuendos and a wide range of possible dynamics. Also, there's a huge different emphasis in the mixing. If you don't know what mixing is, it's controlling the volume of all the different instruments and vocals in a song. Musical theater tends to put a heavier emphasis on the orchestra, you know, being a derivative of classical music and everything. But movie musicals tend to go the pop route. And pop music, the vocals have a heavier emphasis over the instruments or the orchestra, if you can really call it that in pop music. Now I'm gonna play an example of Defying Gravity, one from Wicked the Musical and one from Wicked the Movie, and just see if you can tell how subdued the orchestra sounds in the movie version rather than in the Broadway recording. And because of all these reasons, we don't get the same awesome rush listening to pre-recorded movie musical music than we do listening to live music when we see an actual performance. Also, this might just be me, but I don't get the same hive switch response seeing a movie as I do seeing a musical. I don't necessarily feel like part of the larger audience when I'm seeing a movie. And really, unless you're seeing a movie opening night, there aren't that many other people in the audience with you. Thanks to streaming services, there are less people going to the movies. So yeah, I don't have that same giddy, endorphin-y feeling at the movie theater than I do on the theater. And all these different factors are what takes the magic out of movie musicals. It's why when you see live musicals, your entire body feels bubbly and excited, but when you see a movie musical, you're kind of just watching people sing on a screen. And at the end of the day, it's all Tim Cooper's fault or whatever his name is. Let me know if there are any movie musicals that you actually prefer to live performance. For me, it's Sweeney Todd, and it's because the movie is shorter than the live musical, and it's Sondheim, so the less of it I can get, the better. But that's about it for this video. Thank you, and break legs.